So I was actually born in France. My parents are Americans, actually. My father's from Colorado, and my mother was from New York and Connecticut. And my parents liked to travel a lot, which was good. And growing up in Colorado, I was a real camping kind of guy and skier and later mountain climber. And my parents liked, we went to Mexico and Stonehenge in England, and we would go to France and Greece and Turkey and Spain and stuff like that. And so I loved traveling. I was always interested in ancient history and archaeology, also in Atlantis, in paranormal things, and in UFOs, reincarnation, ESP, Bigfoot, whatnot, the unexplained. I was always liked all that kind of stuff. And I really wanted to travel all over the world, and I wanted to go to Tibet and the Himalayas. I was a technical climber as I came out of high school and did rock climbing. And eventually I was going to the University of Montana, in Missoula, Montana. And are you from Missoula? Okay, yeah. And I had, I was studying archaeology and comparative religion and philosophy, and I was taking a Mandarin course in Chinese. And our teacher was a Catholic priest from mainland China, Father Wong, as I remember him. And one day he came to class, and he had a letter from one of his former students who was living in Taiwan and teaching English. And he wrote to Father Wong, and he said, Father Wong, if any of your students want to come to Taiwan and teach English, I can help them do that. You don't have to have a degree or speak Chinese fluently or anything like that. I mean, they just want Americans to come over. And you teach conversational English. You're not teaching people ABCs. They already gone for years through English. The whole thing was just to get people to talk. And we would talk about movies and hello? Okay. So, yeah, and I went up to Father Wong right after class that day, and I said, Father Wong, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go to Taiwan and teach English. And so I literally dropped out of school, tried to sell my car that I had, and started planning, my big trip over to Asia and whatnot. And this was 1976 that I did this. So I went to Taiwan. I went to Japan first, and then to Taiwan, and I taught English in Taipei for a while. And I met another American at the school. He was from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he was a rock climber and stuff too. And I told him that, my plan was I wanted to go to Kathmandu and go climbing in the Himalayas and do all this stuff. And in fact, I'd even brought climbing equipment with me, rope and stuff like that, which was completely unnecessary because in Kathmandu they have all that stuff, even cheaper, and you can buy it. Because expeditions, when expeditions go into the Himalayas to climb Mount Everest or whatever, the Nepalese government allows them to bring all the equipment they want into the country, but they can't take it out. So you go to Kathmandu, and it's camping equipment, city. Every other shop is selling high grade, some of it brand new climbing equipment that's never been used, and for half the price that you would pay in Europe or the US or something. Anyway, we went to Kathmandu. We flew to Hong Kong and then to Thailand, and then we actually went to Burma and then to Calcutta. Took a train up to the Nepalese border. This was all like October of 1976 or something. Got to Kathmandu, and then planned our trip. We actually climbed a sub-peak of Dhaulagiri. Dhaulagiri's the fourth highest mountain in the world. And we only went about 20,000 feet, something like that. But anyway, it was a great experience. And that got me going. and got the travel bug again, and I just started hitting the road, and did other climbs actually in Nepal, and then I went to India. And if I had, just $500 on me or something, I was rich. You can really travel very, very cheaply in India and throughout Asia back then, still today. I went through Pakistan, what they call the old hippie trail, which was Kathmandu through India and then Pakistan and through Afghanistan. So I was in Afghanistan for a month and Iran, and then eventually I made my way through Turkey and Syria. I went to Israel, actually, where I worked on an agricultural commune for a while. And ultimately I ended up in Egypt and in Sudan, and I wanted to see the Great Pyramid. I'd read a book in Nepal about the Great Pyramid that just fascinated me. I knew it was like, wow, I got to see the Great Pyramid, and I did all that. Egypt is fantastic. I climbed the Great Pyramid then too, and that was something. Watch the sunset. Back then, you could kind of do stuff like that. Actually, you're not supposed to, but it's almost, in Egypt, it's kind of like India. If you just bribe enough people, you can do anything. So, and I traveled in Sudan, but I was running out of money, and I was lucky. I got a job with a Kenyan American catering company that was running the kitchens for Chevron Oil. Chevron was doing oil exploration in Sudan at the time, so I suddenly got a really good job, and sort of with the oil company. And I was able to bank quite a bit of money, and then I was flying around Africa a little bit on the oil company planes and stuff like that. And I traveled for 2.5 years through Africa eventually, after quitting my job. Ended up in Cape Town in South Africa, and I worked in a sporting goods store there, ran the camping equipment department and whatnot for a while. And then eventually I actually bought a ticket in Zambia all the way to Tokyo, which would take me back through the Seychelles, and I was in the Comoro Islands, I was in Somalia, I was in Djibouti, I was in Yemen, and ultimately, and I was in Saudi Arabia even. And I actually returned to India, and my mom came and met me. I went back to Kathmandu and did more climbing and trekking there, and then went to Southeast Asia and to China, and I became one of the first people to ever just travel around China, which was now about 1980. I was gone for 5.5 years, and up until that time, you had to go to China in big groups, and but I was one of the first people to just go into China as an individual, and I was actually with a friend from Ohio, a guy named Bill Barrett. And so he and I just bummed around China for a couple of months, and that was great. I did then finally return to the U.S., and I moved to Illinois, but then I also started traveling in South America and Central America, and also to Pacific Islands, and Australia and New Zealand and stuff like that. And so ultimately, over these, 10 years or so, I had traveled all over the world, and my interests are really archaeological. I'm trained as an archaeologist, basically, but I don't have a degree. And I was always interested in Atlantis, and I started writing these books, ultimately, the Lost Cities books, and I had a publisher in Chicago. My first book was a book called A Hitchhiker's Guide to Africa and Arabia. And it was really an on-the-road kind of adventure travel book. And that book got rewritten ultimately and republished by me as Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of Africa and Arabia. With my first book, Hitchhiker's Guide to Africa and Arabia, I got a pretty good advance for it from Chicago Review Press, and it was the kind of book they said they liked, sort of college, sort of trade paperbacks and stuff. But of course, the book didn't get on the New York Times bestseller list or anything like that. And the publisher one day sat me down and he kind of said, look, kid, don't quit your day job. You can't really live off writing books. And he told me, he said, it's not really authors that make the money anyway. He said, it's publishers. They make the money. And right then I got a small inheritance of from some land in Colorado that was sold. And I got like $7,000 or something out of it, I don't know. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be a publisher. If the money's in publishing, then I'm an author already, but now I'll be a publisher too. So I started my own publishing company called Adventures Unlimited Press, and this was now about 1985 or so. And we were one of the first sort of desktop publishers, and I had an early Apple computer. Laser printers had just come out then, fax machines and stuff. So we were one of the first publishers who could typeset books with just an Apple computer and a laser printer. Up until that time, to typeset a book, you had to have it typeset. It cost thousands of dollars. You'd have to go to a typesetter. They would use these special machines called CompuGraphics, and they would ultimately print your book out page by page on a kind of photographic paper. So it cost thousands of dollars just to typeset a book up until that time. But we pioneered this whole thing of just bypassing all that and printing out this laser printed pages and then sending those to the printer. Today, you use PDFs. Around the year 2000, the whole book industry and typesetting industry changed, where you create a PDF out of your book in Microsoft Word or in InDesign or something, and then you send that to the printer and they print it. So all that old CompuGraphic and typesetting stuff has just died really in the late 90s. So I began traveling all over the world and writing the Lost Cities books. I wrote other books. I got very interested in Nikola Tesla, anti-gravity, UFOs, more into the technology of it. And being an archaeologist and wanting to know about megalith building, and so I realized, that just moving these giant blocks of stone around and stuff must be so incredibly difficult. And so I have this kind of double interest of technology, anti-gravity, levitation, even free energy, things like that, and Nikola Tesla, whatnot, with the archaeological kind of things. So we're going to start right now. We're going to first talk about and see a bunch of megaliths and things like that. And we're going to go to South America. Then we're going to see some of the weird cone heads and whatnot, and keep going from there. So it should be interesting. And by the way, being this intensive, and we're a relatively small crowd here, of course, feel free to ask questions. I would think you would have some as we go along. All right, so let's start. Part of my interest too has always been how old civilization is. Of course, I read Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods and things, and all those books fascinated me. I loved unexplained kind of things, ancient civilizations, and I was particularly interested in Atlantis, sunken cities, Lemuria, ancient India, and the Rama Empire, and stuff like that. So until recently, mainstream archaeologists, and although a lot of people don't know this, even archaeologists, but what mainstream archaeologists were saying that the ruins on Malta were the oldest ruins in the world. And they're megalithic. That's what we're seeing here, is these ruins on Malta. And they were the oldest ruins in the world, going back to around 7,000 BC, actually, about 9,000 years ago. And these are some of the ruins here at Malta. They are gigantic. There's another sister island to Malta called Gozo. It has supposedly the oldest ruins there, Gigantija, which is what you're seeing here. Huge walls, very worn, and a fascinating area. And at least until recently, the oldest ruins in the world. Malta apparently at one time, and all of the Mediterranean was really like a big valley. And Malta today is an island, a couple of islands just off of Sicily. And but in ancient times, there were all of these pygmy hippopotami, pygmy elephants, other deer and large animals were running around Malta. Today it's kind of a small rocky island. But what happened was, there's a cave there, the cave we're looking at here, the Dar Galam Cave, and some kind of tidal wave hit Malta and wiped out the whole island and washed all of these animals, or many of them, into this cave, the Dargalam cave. So this cave was evidence of some kind of cataclysmic flood and tidal wave hitting Malta, wiping it out, and ultimately flooding the Mediterranean at that time. And the Mediterranean has over 200 known sunken cities. And of course, they weren't built underwater. So the Mediterranean is bigger and deeper today. What were islands in the Mediterranean weren't islands during that time. And just recently, actually, between Malta and Sicily, they found this obelisk that had fallen over, and it's underwater. It's like in about 100 feet of water. So they know it's a man-made object, and it apparently was this obelisk. So here we go, that kind of a thing. And this is a huge, is a giant piece of stone that's apparently fallen over and broken, and would have broken essentially in this cataclysm and tidal wave that literally flooded the Mediterranean. Up until that time, the Mediterranean would have had just a few lakes in it. It was almost kind of like the Dead Sea or like Death Valley or something like that. So that's this kind of interesting thing. But now, in the last just 8 years or so, they're now mainstream archaeologists. What they're saying is that the oldest ruins in the world, and megalithic ruins, is at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And my wife and I went there a couple of years ago. What's at Göbekli Tepe? Göbekli Tepe is in south central Turkey. It's actually near to Syria. And today, that area is a very dangerous area because of all the problems in Syria and stuff today. What you see at Göbekli Tepe, among other things, are these giant T-shaped megaliths. And they are megalithic. They're probably weighing maybe like about 5 tons or so. Anything really that's weighing a ton or a couple of tons is megalithic for sure. And many megaliths get up to 50 tons, 100 tons, even 500 tons, even 1,000 tons and more. And we'll be talking about all that. At Göbekli Tepe, you see these T-shaped megaliths, and they have these animals carved in relief on them. Foxes and vultures, other things, kind of snakes. There's an aerial photo. So exactly what was going on at Göbekli Tepe, they're not sure. Once again, with the mainstream, they don't want civilization going back really more than 10,000 years. That everybody's in the Stone Age before that. But Göbekli Tepe is nearly 11,000 years old. It's going back to around 9,800 BC, something like that, making it the oldest really known ruins. The excavations really being done by a German university, a Catholic university, and Turkish archaeologists. But what they said about Göbekli Tepe, which is a little bit odd, was that they don't want civilization to be really older than that. And so what they would say is kind of paradoxical statements like, yes, these are, carved, planned megaliths and stuff, but there was no civilization. There wasn't really culture. There weren't cities. Yeah, nobody, they're not out there building roads and bridges and walls around cities. No, they're still these hunter-gatherers, but for some reason they got together and started carving these megaliths, putting them up. Which sort of implies organization and, in a sense, civilization. So this is what Göbekli would have more or less looked like when it was built. And it is megalithic, and although things in Malta and other places are much more impressive. So another strange thing about Göbekli Tepe was that they buried it. It was purposely buried, apparently, by the people on top of a hill. So it's actually on top of this hill, and then they buried it purposely, which must have taken quite a bit of effort in themselves. Here we can see where where Göbekli Tepe is and stuff. And right up in here, Göbekli Tepe's here, this series over here. Now, in this area over here is another place called Baalbek in Lebanon. And we'll go there right now. So Baalbek in Lebanon really has the largest megaliths that we know of in the world. According to mainstream archaeologists, and this is one of the things that I have to really understand and know as a fringe archaeologist, they would call me. And that is, what's the mainstream explanation of things? I mean, they have to explain all this stuff too. They have to have an explanation. Sometimes their explanations are okay and pretty good. Sometimes their explanations are very bad. And that's where I become the critic, and I write about all this stuff in my books, of course. So mainstream is saying that Baalbek in Lebanon is Roman built. It's a Roman temple to Baalbek. It was built by Romans around 100 AD or something like that. But really what Baalbek is it's got Roman temples on top of this massive platform that's much older. So like in many archaeological sites, you have different levels of work and time frames. Particularly when you're making things that are so gigantically huge, like megalithic buildings, you've got, they're indestructible. They're going to be sitting around for thousands of years. They're not going anywhere. Ruins in Egypt, as a good example. Most of the temples and things you see in Egypt, they're 3,000 years old, at least. Some more like 4,000 or more. And they're still standing today. And tourists are walking through these buildings that are thousands of years old, and they should last for another couple of thousand years. So these ancient builders were building things that were basically indestructible, things that they wanted them to last for thousands of years, and they have. Our own buildings today are only built to last 100 years maybe, or 200 max. But the ancient peoples were building buildings to last for thousands of years. So at Baalbek, this is what you can see here, these huge, huge ashlars. They weigh around 1,000 tons each. These huge blocks here that are the base. They're gigantically huge. They're the size of a railway car, something like that. They weigh so much. Then even larger megaliths are at the quarry at Baalbek. They weigh even more than 1,000 tons. We'll see those in a minute. But the problem is why are you going to build, and why are you going to quarry a 1,000-ton giant block of stone that is almost impossible to move? And then you're going to stack it up in walls. I mean, they have been moved. But they seem to be doing something so incredibly difficult. I mean, it boggles our minds. Why would they want to build something with such giant blocks of stone? We don't do that today. But part of the answer is that it had to be easy for them. It couldn't have been so incredibly difficult as we see it. They had to, just cutting the stone, the quarrying it, the removing it, and then to move it and lift it up and stack it into walls. I mean, they had to have, in my mind, some kind of levitation, some kind of anti-gravity, some means of making the stone weightless, in a sense, and then moving it. Here's a friend of mine, a British pilot named Ralph Allis, standing near one of the quarried stones, weighing over 1,000 tons. They're just gigantically huge. They've recently, at the quarry in Baalbek, they have found this new block. It was buried under a bunch of rubble. They say that it weighs 1,650 tons. And this would be then the largest known quarried block of stone anywhere in the world. There may be other larger blocks somewhere, perhaps underwater, but that's what we've got going here. It's mind-boggling. Even today, we don't have cranes and things that, movable ones that can move something like this. In ports, you do have some fixed cranes that are built that can move and pick up something this big in like a port facility. But all those kind of cranes are specially built. There's not that many in the world. In fact, just a few months ago, this crane in Mecca collapsed while it was lifting also something building this hotel, and the whole crane came down on this building, and it killed like 100 people. So moving and lifting these things is just so incredibly difficult. But archaeologists have to explain it. They can't just say, oh, well, we don't know how they moved these things. Oh, they had to use some kind of anti-gravity or levitation. So how are they going to, how would they move it? Well, a French archaeologist did try to explain it. And this is his explanation right here. And what he said was that they would build a cage around the blocks, and then put in a kind of an hourglass sort of notch in the stone, which they would have to later somehow level out the stone. And they would put these little notches up here, and then those things could go, they're like kind of an anvil. They would fit in small stones, and they fit into the block of stone, and then you'd have pulleys and ropes, and you're building this giant cage around this 1,000-ton megalith, and then you've got all these people, and you're pulling on these ropes, and you're going to move this thing a couple of inches, and then you're going to have to do it all over again and rebuild the cage around it to move it. I mean, this is the only way they could figure out how they're going to move these things. And, it's kind of dumb, really. It's not going to work, but they had no other explanation. And that's part of the thing, it's the same thing they say in Egypt, it's just, we'll talk about this more when we get to South America. Well, the Pharaoh would just order these things done, and however many thousands of people it took to drag a statue around or a block of stone, they just did it. And it was all brute force and just kind of primitive pulling and pushing on these giant megaliths. Now, what I was saying, that Baalbek is really Roman ruins on top of these earlier megalithic ruins. That is what Solomon's temple is too in Jerusalem. It's the same thing. And this giant block of stone that you can see here, and the girl is standing here, and there's other perfectly fitted smaller blocks, but they're also megalithic, just right about her shoulder length there. But this giant block, which they call the Western Stone, is also some huge 1,000-ton block of stone, and then these other blocks are up on top of it. You could not see this stone until relatively recently, just about the last 25 years or something, because this is part of the Wailing Wall of Jerusalem, where the Orthodox Jews like to go and they pray on the wall, and they put little notes and stuff in it. And so they cut a tunnel along it, because there were all these other buildings. And how come this keeps going off? So then they went through and they cut this tunnel, and because of this tunnel, you can now see this block of stone. And it's hard to get a good picture of it, but there it is. And but we don't even know how much it weighs, because we can't see behind it and see actually just how large this stone really is. So they are able to guess at just how large this thing is. So now let's go to Egypt, to Abydos. Abydos is a megalithic site that's apparently pre-Egyptian. Abydos is is actually in southern Egypt, near to Luxor. And what is what's at Abydos is also this thing, which is slightly different. You go at the back of the Egyptian temple, and you're in this place, and it's called the Osirion. And so the Osirion is down in a swamp. It has no Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's massive. The reason that the Temple of Abydos was built, apparently, by dynastic Egyptians is because these older ruins are here. And what they've got is things like, the Egyptian government spent literally decades pumping water out of it because it was down in a swamp. But you see here some of these notched blocks, and you see these little knobs and stuff that are coming out. And then, well, archaeologists, yeah, we're going to see that now in South America. And we don't know, archaeologists don't know why these things have these knobs. So here we go. We're going to go now to Cuzco in South America. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time in South America for looking at this. So we'll see, now notice the knobs are on here too. This is, in fact, the famous stone of 12 angles. It's not by any means one of the largest stones there, but it's very, very much articulated with all these angles and cut, and it's perfectly fitted together. It also has those little knobs, which are, archaeologists have thought that those knobs had something to do with somehow holding the blocks up while they very tediously chipped away at all of these edges because they had to fit perfectly. And that's one of the things about in South America and other places too, is that not only are they building with large blocks of granite or limestone and basalt in some cases, but they're perfectly fitting the blocks together. And how they would do that is another problem too. And it would seem really that they're using power tools to do this. They're fitting the blocks together. When you have blocks of stone that are perfectly fitted in this jigsaw polygonal manner, and it's the highest, most advanced form of really megalithic stone engineering, because the blocks are all fitted together and locked in. And when an earthquake hits the wall, the blocks jumble and move, but they're locked together, and so the wall will not collapse. This site is an unusual site, and it's exactly like the places in Peru, in that it's a jigsaw pattern. But this is in northern Greece, near to Albania, and it's a place called the Necromonticon. It was only discovered in 1960 by German archaeologists, and it's the same kind of construction that's at Cuzco. So here we have, again, this polygonal blocks that are cut but perfectly fitted together. Right above Cuzco is Sacsayhuaman, this gigantic walls. They're zigzag walls. They're also polygonal, fit together. Here's an aerial photo of it. They're put together in this zigzag kind of walls together. There were towers that were here at the very top. They've been destroyed. The Incas and the Spanish had a big battle here at Sacsayhuaman. And this is where the Spanish really defeated the Incas finally and conquered the Inca Empire. Huge blocks of stone. Mainstream archaeologists are saying that, well, yeah, this is all built by the Incas. And they only like 100 years before the Spanish conquest. The Incas are very recent to us. And these ruins, these giant ruins, they're not, according to mainstream archaeologists, they're not thousands of years old. They're literally only hundreds of years old. Say about 800 years old, just a little bit before the Spanish got there in 1500 or so, 1530. So you see the polygonal blocks, the way they're fitted together, it's huge. And then there's a giant field in front of it, which you could land like airships and stuff like that. And the other things that you see there, it's Sacsayhuaman, are very strange. As you walk out the back towards the quarry area, you see things like this, where giant upside down staircases, huge blocks of stone that have been carved and articulated, but for no reason. I mean, it's not any functional thing. It's like somebody has got these power tools and they're just playing with them and practicing, cutting up the stone, slicing it. And not because it's so difficult for them, but they've got some kind of plasma cutter or whatever that's cutting, melting stone, or power tools like grinders and wheels, diamond cutting wheels and things like that. The mainstream also, again, they would cut through solid stone like this and to these tunnels and things. The mainstream archaeological explanation is that, well, yeah, the Incas were practicing, on these things so that they would get things right. In Egypt and in Peru and stuff, they're saying that they're using just stone hammers in their hands to do all this because they don't have iron tools and things like that to do these things. So it's the whole idea. The people are primitive. They don't even, the Incas supposedly didn't know about the wheel. They didn't have writing. Yet they were doing things allegedly that are just like impossible to do like us. So the mainstream, again, they have to explain all this. Well, the Incas just, they quarried these giant blocks of stone because they wanted to build with giant blocks of stone. And then they would have to drag them up these ramps and things like that, put them in place. And it wasn't just enough to put these giant blocks, into walls. They had to perfectly fit them together as well, which must have been so difficult. So how could they do it? Again, my point is always that, they're using power tools. They've got levitation, some kind of anti-gravity. They're not doing it because it's hard for them. They're doing it because it's easy. Something they can do easily. Here's Machu Picchu, the famous secret city in the Andes. It's a secret city. It's up on top of a mountain. It's a megalithic city. The Spanish never knew about this city. It's down the Urubamba River. It's going sort of into the jungle, actually, of the Amazon. There you have also this famous, what they call it, the wall of three windows. It's megalithic, perfectly fitted granite blocks. Here again are some of the blocks, the perfectly fitted blocks there at Machu Picchu. You see again those curious knobs that are on the blocks. We're still not sure what that is, what that was for. One idea with these knobs is that they had a way of like melting the rock, of putting some kind of what they call a plasma cutter into the rock. In the Star Wars movie, Revenge of the Sith, I think, or something, and the Jedi Knights guys they're on the space station and they're locked in this room. It's right early on in the movie, and the guys on the space station realize, these Jedi Knights are here and we got to kill them now. So they basically lock them in this room. They bring them into this room and then the doors all slam. And then they're going to gas the room and basically kill them. And they know they have to get out of the room. And what they do in the movie is they whip out their lightsabers and they thrust them into this door, like a vault-type door. And they start melting it. And they basically melt this door with their lightsabers to get out of the room. This early on in the movie. So these lightsabers, if you were going to, and George Lucas and Star Wars movies are great. He's a genius. And it seems that, and to try and explain these knobs, what they had was something like a lightsaber. And it would be a plasma cutter. A plasma, in this sense, is an electrified gas. like a neon light is a plasma too. But a plasma cutter would be like exactly like a lightsaber. You turn this thing on, and a normal plasma gas would be just going out straight. To make a sort of lightsaber, it's like you have the plasma going out, but then you bend it back into the handle. So, and that makes it this like kind of lightsaber sword, and it does have a tip then at the end. Otherwise, it would just keep going out. So if you had something like that, this may be the answer to these knobs, that they're melting the rock so that it's a little bit pliable, almost like a putty, and it helps them kind of shape the rocks, although I believe they were also cut with saws and stuff. But as you pull the lightsaber out, and the rock is kind of molten, as you pull it out, you're going to have this little knob. I don't know. This is about the best explanation I've really been able to come up with here on that one. We still don't know what these knobs were. So we're at Machu Picchu. Again, these more stuff there, the giant, perfectly fitted blocks like this. And notice the big lichen patches. That's indicative of great age. Lichen grows very, very slowly, eating rock. If you brought a geologist in to try and date this, he would probably say, yeah, this wall has been sitting there for thousands of years. And that's what it would take for that much lichen to build up on the blocks. Between Cuzco and Machu Picchu is this other megalithic site called Ollantaytambo, and it's on the Urubamba River too. So when you get to Ollantaytambo, the main thing is what's called a sun temple, and it's all up here on top of these cliffs. To get up there, you go up these steps, and then you cut up. You're going up here, and then you cut up into this area. So we'll have a look at some of that. So you get up there, and you start going up these stairs. You start seeing this perfectly fit andesite granite. You see the knobs. You're coming up. You see these walls like this, big patches of lichen there, and more knobs. It's megalithic. It's quite amazing to see. Perfectly fitted, again, jigsaw walls, indestructible, perfectly fitted. I mean, we couldn't even do walls like this today, in my mind. And then you get up to the top, and this is what you see. You start seeing all these giant blocks just lying around, and the main thing the tourists see there is this wall. This is where you stand with your group and take some photos and all that. And they call this the wall of the 7 megaliths. It's also got big knobs and things on it. It's very unusual too because of these very thin pieces of granite right between the blocks. This is really, really unusual. Still fitted together. These are huge blocks of stone, weighing probably hundreds of tons. And again, they call it a sun temple. They don't really know what it was for, what happened. There was a battle here between the Incas and the Spanish too at one point. So as you go around the corner, this is what you see. Giant blocks of stone, but you see some unusual things here. So what you see is giant block of stone like this, and then it's notched right here, and here's the other wall. There's weird pillows on it. They're not sure what that is. It might have to do with somehow the quarrying. But then you have this crummy rubble fill. That's about 7 feet tall, that. So once again, the mainstream archaeologists are saying, oh, well, yeah, the Incas just dragged this giant, 200-ton block of stone up here, and then they just filled it in with a bunch of crummy rubble right there. So what's really clear, I mean, it's obvious I think, to people when they're there, except for to mainstream archaeologists, is that, yeah, here's these giant blocks. I mean, this was meant to have another giant block perfectly fitted next to it. So you have two different levels of construction. You have your Atlantean or alien construction or something here that's, you know, mind-blowing. And then you have your Inca construction, which is all this crummy rubble. I mean, it's absolutely clear that's what's going on. But mainstream archaeologists won't go for that. No, that, you know, the Incas had to build all this stuff just before the Spanish got there. So you're looking around, and there's these same blocks and stuff again, and it's strange. What it looks like today is exactly what it looked like during the Spanish conquest, and it's what it looked like during Inca times. I mean, nothing has changed, and these blocks are just sitting around doing nothing. The mainstream explanation is that the Incas just never finished. They never completed what they were building. Building some temple, they dragged these blocks up there. Suddenly the Spanish invaded them, and they didn't have time to finish their gigantic building, you know. But what seems to have happened really was that either some kind of cataclysm destroyed this whole thing, and I mean the Incas too, they were incapable of really moving any of these blocks of stone around. And they're heavy, perfectly cut granite blocks. And you can see the articulation that's going on with these here. Does this shine through? And yeah, the way it's coming, this articulation, so they've already notched and cut it, doing things that beyond just cutting the blocks and stuff. And then on some of these giant blocks that are sitting there, you see these things, and these are very important, and I write about them in my book on ancient technology in Peru and Bolivia and whatnot, and that's these things. These are called keystone cuts. They're cut in these blocks. They can be a T shape or like an hourglass type shape, and there's always got to be they span two blocks. The molten metals or a metal clamp is then put into this. There's always got to be another block with a T-shaped thing on the other side. And then what it's to do is to hold these giant blocks together in a sense. And although they're so huge and big, you wouldn't think they would be going anywhere. But this was the method that they used. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you do that in fire. Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the mystery here is that absolutely they're using molten metals and pouring them into these blocks. And so how are they getting these molten metals? And yeah, and that's another thing. The foundry, you've got to mine the ores. You've got to wash the ores. You've got to put them in furnaces. I mean, you're going to have a whole Bethlehem steel kind of operation, to do all that kind of stuff. So, and that's something that archaeologists don't usually address. I mean, they know they have these metals, but they don't see where they were coming from and how, and all the technologies that they were using for that. So you've got these blocks like that. Here, once again, you can see this little T, keystone cut on it. But if you go around the corner, and here's another block of stone here, it's also got this T-shaped keystone cut on it. But this is in the wrong place. This is not where the stone should be. And the keystone cut can't be on a vertical wall because molten metal has to be poured into that. So this is, and of course there would be another block, but next to it with a corresponding T-shape so that the metal could be poured into it. That's not what's going on here. Is that like a giant staple then? Like a giant staple, yeah. But it can't be on a wall, like a vertical wall. It has to be down on a horizontal wall. Yeah. And it's a clamp, and so, yeah, the clamp spans the two stones. We'll see more pictures of this later as we go. It spans the two stones, and in theory, it helps hold them together in an earthquake or something. one of the things that really helps, that I'm always interested in when I go to these places, is to see, to go to the quarry sites, where the quarries are. So we're now going up to the quarry that is, that's across the river. And I've been up there a couple of times, like 3 times. And the last couple of times we actually rode horses up there. So here's the Urubamba down here. I'm taking the photo from high up on this trail, looking across the valley. Here's where Ollantaytambo is over in here, all those megaliths we were just looking at. It's interesting to look at this valley because these fields, which are like potato and corn fields and stuff, they're done in such a way as to give an image of a pyramid. Do you see? Can you see the pyramid there? In the, you know, it's and even doors and stuff like that. It's like the fields have been engineered in such a way, and you can only see it from when you're up by this quarry, to give you this illusion of some kind of a pyramid. But this was the strange thing. Then they had to drag the blocks down. They had to go across this river. And they couldn't figure that one out. They couldn't figure out how they might get them over the river. Because they're saying that, yeah, they're dragging these blocks. So as you get up to the quarry, what you see is, it's an unusual quarry. What it is a giant scree field of this mountain. It's like solid granite. And it's like somebody has blasted the face of these cliffs so that, like even with some weapon or something, so that all of these big, giant boulders just kind of came down and fell down. And then they would go up to the biggest boulders and they would start cutting it and slicing it. And they would do the dressing of the stone at the quarry. And they would create these giant blocks of stone, like the size of a semi-truck or something. And here's one of the stones, and you can see how it was being sawn. What must have been up there was some giant saw that was like literally sawing these blocks like a loaf of bread. And then for whatever reason, they abandoned or stopped working here. They were cutting the stone block, but they never moved it in the end. What's also up there is this giant cut stone wheel, which is unusual. It's like some Fred Flintstone wheel or something. And it's sitting up there. And it baffles archaeologists too, because the Incas weren't supposed to know about the wheel. And yet they're making these giant stone wheels, and they don't even know what they were for. So, and it's also perfectly sliced and smooth. I mean, these things are not rough at all, unless for some reason they've been exposed. So yeah, the cutting of these, I'm maintaining that they have to use giant power saws, huge machines that are cutting the stone. And then after that, you're going to have to, once you quarry these giant stones, now you have to move them. And then that's even more difficult, ultimately, than the quarrying and the cutting. Yeah, that right. And they have to drag them and lift them. And here's the other thing, and I can't go into all this in much more detail in my ancient technology in Peru and Bolivia, including discussing the mainstream explanations and stuff. But yeah, there's a French-Swiss stonemason who is a professor now at the University of California at Berkeley. And he's the one who's tried to explain these things in a more normal way. And what he says is that, yeah, they do the quarrying, which is difficult enough. And then, according to him, they would, because in South America they don't really have heavy animals like oxen or anything like that. So they would harness people up into a giant harness, like horses for a stagecoach. And you'd have literally, according to him, hundreds of people, 800 people or something, all, harnessed up to drag these blocks forward. And, there's a calculation for that. You calculate how heavy this stone is. And, okay, this stone weighs, 400 tons. or 200 tons or something. Okay, well, we're going to need 800 guys pulling on these ropes to move these stones. This is literally the calculations they've made. There's problems, though, with that still. And that is because going up onto Ollantaytambo, it's on top of a cliff and a knife ridge. And so they couldn't figure out where all those guys would be standing. There wasn't room for them. And what's more, they can't turn a corner that way. I mean, with 800 guys all pulling on these giant blocks, all they can do is pull it in a straight line. It can't suddenly make a corner. So, you know, the mainstream archaeologists are saying like, well, yeah, we've kind of got this figured out, but, you know, not quite. Because there's just not room for all these guys to be standing there making stuff. So, now we're still in Peru, and we'll go back to Cusco. And this is we're inside what's called the Coricancha, the Sun Temple. And in the Coricancha is, particularly, there's like 2 doors like this. And this is one. They've got plexiglass in front of it now. But they're doorways, they're megalithic. And they have all of these little channels and holes and things like for cables or something. And it looks like some kind of device, some electronic device or something was in this, like a big television screen or something like that. And it had cables coming through. They had made holes in the stone so the cables and stuff like that could come through and be attached to this thing. It's very complicated and articulated, all these things. It's quite unusual. And you stand there looking at it thinking like, whoa, what is all this about? Whoops, I'll go back. So again, the mainstream normal explanation is, well, the Incas built this and they hung some tapestries there, you know, with some ropes and stuff. You know, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of work just to hang some tapestries or something. So we'll keep moving up higher into the Andes to Lake Titicaca area. Half of Lake Titicaca is in Peru. The other half is in Bolivia. And along the western side of Lake Titicaca and the Peru side, there's a couple of megalithic sites that are pretty interesting. One is called Silustani. It has all these many towers. And then there's also this one that not many tourists really go to. It's called Cotimbo. It's on top. Both of these sites are on top of mountains, on top of flat top mesas, actually. You have to hike up a hill to get up there. You have to park down below, and you go on this hike. On the way up along the trail, you see this, where it's on a cliff face that you sort of pass by. And curiously, for no real reason, it's like some guy with his power tools just decided to sort of slice along here and then polish this whole part of the cliff for no reason. Just, it's like he's got his power tool with him, he's playing with, and he's like, well, you know, I'll do this, you know, like. So anyway, then finally you get up to the top, and you see this. You see these large buildings and towers. They're megalithic. And the towers themselves are also have these pillowy shaped blocks. They're perfectly fitted together. And what's unusual here now is that you start seeing like these snakes are carved on it. And other animals too, in relief. Pumas and condors and things like that, where you're seeing. It's hard to do this too, because when you carve something in relief like that, that means you're cutting away all the stone around it to leave that part coming up. Now, remember at Göbekli Tepe, those T-shaped megaliths, they also had these animals like this carved on it. It's exactly like the same. And back in Cusco, which isn't so far away from all this, Some of the blocks of stone that you see around Cuzco have these snakes carved on them, like this, in a wavy line. Most of the stones and things in Peru and in Cuzco don't have anything on them, but a few have these snakes that we're seeing. Well, what's interesting is if you go to northern Iraq, to the temples of the Yazidis there, this is this very, very ancient religion that is still in Kurdistan in northern Iraq. And they still have the temples for this is a religion that is still going on. They claim it's the oldest religion in the world. And the temples there have these snakes on them, these curved snakes. That's what's on a Yazidi temple. Very, very similar, identical in a sense, to what with the snakes and stuff that we're seeing in Peru. As you go along the west side of Lake Titicaca, going to the area where normally you would get on a boat and go to the island of the sun, you see this thing. It's called the door of Amaru Muru, or the Devil's Door. It's this door that's carved into solid rock, into something of a cliff face. It's a very strange geological area here. And you go up to this thing. It's like a doorway, a false door. You get up. It's about 20 feet high up there. And then this lower little notched doorway, it's about 6 feet high. And you've got other cuttings and notches there, and some bird guano on it. And it would seem that some other structure would have been sort of built into this, or something that's completely gone. People claim that it's kind of an interdimensional doorway or some kind of portal, Stargate or something like that. People will go here and meditate, perhaps, and some have claimed to have had, amazing experiences, I suppose, whatnot. But now what's interesting is that if you go to Egypt, like in Giza, you will see the same thing, these false doors. Doors that are going nowhere, just carved into solid rock. This one is on the Giza Plateau, right near the Sphinx and the pyramids. So it's just a curious thing that, what they're doing in Peru, they're also doing in Egypt, and we don't know why. Here's Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca is the highest known navigable lake in the world. It's about 12,500 feet in altitude. It's very deep in many parts of it, particularly the northeast side. It's about 800 feet deep. And the southern part of the lake is much shallower. And as you, at the museum there, they know there's underwater ruins around the lake. There's even supposedly a gold obelisk that these Italian divers claim they found. Scuba diving there is very, very difficult because of the high altitude, and it's very, very cold. So a golden obelisk on the northern side, underwater, of the island of the sun. No, I haven't. And it's hard. You would have to bring your own scuba equipment. You apparently need to dive with like mixed gases and things like that. It's very tricky. No one really dives there. Jacques Cousteau did go to Lake Titicaca and do some diving. Now, one of the strange things about Lake Titicaca is that it has seahorses in it. And today it's a freshwater lake now too. But geologists cannot explain that. They don't know how seahorses would be in Lake Titicaca. Seahorses really, live in tropical oceans, like in coral reefs, like Indonesia or something like that. That's where you really find seahorses. And how seahorses would be in a lake that's 12,000 feet in the Andes, they can't figure that one out. They're like, well, yeah. Yeah. And what it kind of suggests is that Lake Titicaca was at sea level at one point.
Or they came out of the sky from storms, like fish balls.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. Yeah, like raining fish or raining frogs or something like that. Raining seahorses on you, yeah. And that's an interesting thing, yeah. Whether a tornado or a water spout would just suck up a bunch of water and then dump it there, or a big UFO, going and sucking up part of a coral reef, bringing it up to Lake Titicaca and dropping all these animals in, see which ones survive or something. Well, James Churchward, who wrote the Lost Continent of Mu books, he wrote the first book, Lost Continent of Mu, like 1924. And he wrote then other books after that, the Children of Mu, Sacred Symbols of Mu, Cosmic Forces of Mu. And this is one of his maps. And he had been sent from India, from his guru in India, who had a secret library and stuff, and he was sent to go out and search for evidence of Mu. And he went out across the Pacific. This was all the late 1800s and whatnot. So his explanation was that the Amazon Sea, the Amazon was a sea, South America was as a tectonic plate, was down. Lake Titicaca area was a kind of Panama Canal of the time between what was then the Pacific Ocean going into the Atlantic, and that in a pole shift cataclysm that sank Atlantis in the Atlantic and the Mu in the Pacific, and then the South American whole tectonic plate just was risen up, and so areas that were at sea level were suddenly high in the mountains. The Amazon Sea then became just the jungle basin that it is today. So that was an interesting idea. So I thought I would toss that in there. At Tiwanaku is at just some miles from the southern shores of Lake Titicaca. It's in Bolivia. And this is one of the most famous things that you see at Tiwanaku. This is what's called the Gate of the Sun. And it's standing there by itself. It's been split in an earthquake. It's what's called a monolithic doorway. It would have been part of other structures. You can see how you're coming down here, and there's a big notch right here, and then other parts. So this would have been part of a wall. It's interesting to look at the jambs here, the double jamb of the doorway. This guy in the middle is supposedly Viracocha, and he's wearing a feathered headdress like we associate with Indian chiefs and stuff like that. And he's got these two staffs on either side of him. And what's interesting here too is that there are tears are coming down his eyes. And they call this supposedly the tears of the sun. And those tears are really molten metals, apparently. Gold, liquid gold, and that's tears of the sun would be gold. But that's part of the whole, in my mind, the whole secret of Tiwanaku is that it was a huge metallurgical plant. And that's really what it was for. It was a place for processing ores, washing ores, going through the furnace. There was tin there. I mean, this was like the Bethlehem steel plant of the Andes, at least at the time. I think also that Cusco was some kind of mining and metallurgical area too. At Tiwanaku, also are these giant statues. Some of them are 40, 50 feet tall, made out of sandstone. They dug them up, and some are in the museum, some were taken to La Paz. The guys have these kind of strange fish scale pants on. They're wearing turbans on their heads. They have big goggle kind of eyes. They're oddball looking characters. They're holding strange things in their hands. And what you also see as you walk around parts of Tiwanaku are these small sluice holes, and this was for water. I mean, this little doorway you see at the bottom is really for water to move through. It's very small. So if someone to go through that would have been, they'd have to be like a midget or something like that. But somehow they diverted a river there. Tiwanaku must have had all this water and be like just like a water city with canals, water coming down. They even pumped water up to a lake artificial lake on top of a pyramid. There's a sunken temple there and what they call the Kon-Tiki statue. There's all these faces on the walls. Ancient Aliens did a whole thing there with that. And he's the famous Kon-Tiki of also Thor Heyerdahl of the 50s, the Norwegian archaeologist who did these crossing the oceans with these reed boats and stuff like that. He's got a big thick mustache and a beard. American Indians do not have facial hair. They don't grow mustaches and beards. They don't have to shave. He's also in the tiki position. His hands are in the tiki position. One hand over your heart, the other over your stomach. That's the tiki position. And if you go to Tahiti or New Zealand or something like that with the Polynesians, they'll sell you these little tiki medallions and stuff, and they're always doing that with their hand on their heart and their hand on their stomach. That's called the tiki position. So here's another kind of picture of the tiki guy, just so you can see that way he's got his hands and stuff. Well, if you also go to northern Iraq, into Kurdistan, they have statues there, and they're doing the same thing. They have their hands in this tiki position. So here they're going through. There we are. Here's again a statue from northern Iraq where they're doing the tiki position of their hands. Here also at Tiwanaku is the pyramid of Akapana. This was an artificial pyramid with a lake on top. The lake is in what's called the Andean cross, which is a kind of a Swiss cross type of motif. So this reservoir was probably then used to when they would release the water, it would wash down through all these tunnels. And probably, in my mind, it was to wash different ores. And then those ores would then go to the furnace where you did extract whatever, the gold, the silver, the tin, the copper, and stuff like that. So here's South America. There's Lake Titicaca. Tiwanaku's right over in here. We'll see Lima and whatnot's there. And go ahead. And here's an aerial satellite photo of Lake Titicaca. And it's really two main lakes. The deepest part of the lake is in this part. It's about 800 feet deep. This is where they crosses the island of the Sun over here. This is the lesser lake. Tiwanaku's kind of down around here. This lower lake area here, the lesser lake, they say that there's sunken cities there, ancient ruins, and they say that there's UFOs come out of there too. There's a lot of UFO activity around Lake Titicaca, and UFOs are said to come up out of the water there. So it's almost like there's some underwater UFO base there at Lake Titicaca. Here you can see what they call the smaller lake. So again, it's this area right around in here, supposedly, that has these sunken ruins and stuff like that I'm told. Also on Lake Titicaca is where you have the reed boats that built with these tortora reeds. They use them on the coast. The same kind of reed boats were built in Egypt and Morocco, also in Iraq by the Marsh Arabs and things like that, also on Easter Island. Reed boats are unsinkable. Even if the boat breaks up, all the parts will still float. It has a very shallow draft, so reed boats are also very good for going over coral reefs and things like that.
Is the size of Lake Titicaca an area related to American lakes?
Boy, it's pretty big. Yeah, I mean, it's like the size of one of the Great Lakes, kind of. Yeah, I don't know the exact size. And so now, this is the Pumapunku ruins here in Peru, in Bolivia. I mean, it's only about a half a mile away from the main ruins of Tiwanaku. At Pumapunku, you see these giant sandstone slabs. This is also where those H blocks and things are. You see here what I was talking about earlier, the keystone cuts. Here are huge, huge cuts for giant metal clamps to be poured in. You see these huge platforms. Most of it has been destroyed. Whatever was at Pumapunku is almost completely gone. Big slabs also of granite. And then you have all these amazingly articulated blocks of stone like this. And this kind of articulation that we're seeing here, it's completely unnecessary. It's just like fancy decoration. So once again, they would have to be using power tools to do this kind of articulation. This is not something you can do with a stone hammer in your hand, bashing something out. And who's ever doing this, I mean, they have such sophisticated equipment that doing these decorations and articulation on these stones is no big deal to them. It's not such a giant effort as we might see right there. You see, yeah. What's that?
With the cuts inside the cuts, and with the ability of that time to make little mills and foundry, which you suggested, and nowadays the 3D printing that we use.
Okay, yeah, 3D printing and stuff, yeah.
Create some kind of clay, create some kind of mold, and mold from the rock in order to make like these H blocks or that shape that you showed previously.
Right, and we're about to look at all these H blocks in a minute. Yeah, I mean, right, I mean, that's a good idea that they somehow poured the rock, and these stones, it's a kind of advanced concrete. That's an interesting idea. It's what we use today so effectively, Portland cement, as it's called, concrete. I mean, we're pouring liquid stone. But this is actually granite. I mean, what we were looking at back here, let's see, there we are. Yeah, that's granite. That is granite block. But if they somehow could have a artificial or a liquid granite that they could pour it into these molds. The other way to do it, apparently, which, and we'll get into the H blocks in a moment, is that they've got these, that it's a CAD program, but it's cutting stone, and it would have to be diamond type tools that are cutting the stone. Okay, so I just wanted to show you again these giant, more of these keystone cuts. And this is all pre-Inca. Mainstream archaeologists admit, yeah, this is pre-Inca, of course. But, so here are the keystone cuts. So and we saw the other keystone cuts at Ollantaytambo. So what we're seeing, this is essentially evidence that the makers of Tiwanaku and Pumapunku are the same ones who built Cusco, who built Ollantaytambo, who built Machu Picchu. So the same people are building all of these things, and they're all thousands of years old. And the Incas didn't build any of it. They occupied buildings that were already there. Here we are with the H blocks. We're filming the Ancient Aliens right now. There's me and Brian Forster. So we're doing this whole thing. This is also another block that can be found at Pumapunku. This is Christopher Dunn, my friend, the British-American engineer who studies all this stuff very carefully. And he has all the tools to look at these things. You can, just to show how perfectly level these blocks are. And there's like little devices that you run them along with got a wheel. And it shows you how perfectly straight and smooth something is without any kind of bumps or things. And also what he's looking at here is a block of granite that's been cut, and then it's got a saw cut through it, and then there's all these little drill holes. So how are you going to do that? He's looking at the block here. I mean, it's not some huge block, it's just sort of lying there. And here we go. Here's a close-up of it. So what's so strange here is that not only is it cut and articulated, but over here it has this very fine saw cut and then little drill holes. And just making that saw cut, I mean, that has to be done with a power tool. It can't be done by even some chisel or something like that. I mean, this is power tools that are doing this kind of stuff. It's a very precise thing. And it would take a diamond drill to drill down into those holes. This is another part of Puma Punku. If you walk around the back, it's been this typical trenching that archaeologists do, just digging a trench just to see what's underneath there. And what they found here is parts of walls and what would be, looks like conduits for water or something. And there's these keystone cuts are there. The clamps are missing. You can see them there on these blocks. You're not allowed to actually go to this part of Puma Punku anymore for some reason. And this area here too, which is nearby, they keep you out of here for some reason now. But look at these blocks of stone on these piles of mud and muck. What seems to have happened here is that some giant tidal wave from Lake Titicaca has hit this place, the building, wiped it out, and probably the earthquake or whatever that had also been part of it. And then as the blocks and things fell down, and there they are now, sitting on pillars of mud that are 3 feet high and whatnot. So yeah, this is evidence of this building being destroyed in a cataclysmic flood and earth changes, and then the blocks are sitting there with all this mud and muck. And it's only been recently that Bolivian archaeologists are even uncovering this. I asked, I was there one time and it was an American archaeologist from Berkeley. She was she was a woman. And I asked her about it, and I said, well, don't you think that, Tiwanaku and Puma Punku have been hit by some, giant tidal wave or catastrophe doing all this, destroying the buildings? And she said, oh, no, the Spanish just pulled these buildings down. I mean, it didn't even make sense. I couldn't believe that she would say that. Yeah, now here, this is another weird block there that's at Tiwanaku, and this is also articulated. But this was strange because in this area over here, right at the bottom, this little part here, it's like the right in here, the block itself had gotten chipped and a notch out of it, and they had taken some kind of super concrete, like you were talking about, and patched it with some kind of like a liquid stone or something. And you can see how it's different. It's some kind of like a concrete, but it's harder. But it seems that the stones themselves, they are genuinely going to a stone quarry, and cutting these blocks of stone out. This is another one too that's right in that same area. It's actually on top of the pyramid there. And what's difficult here, and as being there with Christopher Dunn one time, as he said, you have this curved, this has almost been cut by a lathe or something. You've got a curved surface, but where you have a flat surface coming together and meeting a curved surface, in this area right in here. So you have this whole thing, and it's perfectly smooth and curved, but where this curved surface and this flat surface come together here, that's very, very difficult to do. That, again, has to be done with a power tool. You can't just bash that out. Something is cutting these things, and it's like even a CAD program, a computer-aided design machine that's doing it. What is all over Tiwanaku and Puma Punku are these monolithic doors, and this is one that's fallen over. You can see it's cracked, but a monolithic doorway is itself very unusual. It's a doorway cut out of one solid piece of rock, rather than say, a wall on one side and a wall on the other side and then a lintel across the door. No, that's not good enough for them. They want a doorway that's just one big, massive piece of granite. And that's unusual. Here you can see some of the H-block type things in the background. You see this doorway sitting down. It's also been split, having fallen in an earthquake. You can see these holes on the bottom. This is the bottom of the doorway. So those would have had to fit into stone sockets or some kind of metal sockets or something like that. We're not exactly sure how they did all that. Well, there is another place that has monolithic doorways like that, and it's Persepolis in Iran. And the Persepolis is also a megalithic building, and the doorways there are monolithic. They have the same kind of door jamb. They are almost identical to the monolithic doorways that are at Tiwanaku. So, and these are really, well, Iran. This is in Western Iran, quite near to Iraq. But even this double jamb that's coming in, where they haven't just made a plain doorway, they've articulated the jamb as you're going in and made it a lot fancier than would be. I mean, I would basically say that, yeah, this has got to be, it's got to be done with power tools, and these things are heavy too, of course. So here's a diagram of what one of these monolithic doorways looks like, how complicated they are, the way the structure. I mean, it's very precise, all those things that they're doing. All right, and this is in the museum there. Here's one of the metal clamps. So this is what you have the clamps, you have the keystone cuts, then you have the metal clamps that are poured into it. However, these keystone cuts, they're all over the world. These ones are in Egypt. And they're done as like an hourglass kind of a thing. So you have the keystone cuts now. We have them in Peru and in Bolivia. We've got them in Egypt as well. And this is a wall in Edfu in southern Egypt. And it's full of keystone cuts too, but it's very strange. I mean, this is a wall that is built from some other building. The ancient Egyptians themselves tore some other old building down, and then and these blocks had all these keystone cuts, kind of what we saw at Ollantaytambo. And so they've just kind of put these blocks from some other building into this wall. In a few places, they actually matched some keystone cuts, but in other places, there's just a cut by itself because they're not using the keystone cuts. I mean, in the original wall, there would have been the molten clamps and stuff there, but now they don't need them now because they're going to do something else with it. So you have it in Egypt as well, and this remaking things. And in fact, if you go to Vietnam, to central Vietnam, Da Nang area, there's a megalithic site there called My Son. And it's right by where when there was a North and South Vietnam, it was just on the border in South Vietnam. It got bombed accidentally a couple of times during the war. Anyway, here's keystone cuts here too, exactly like the ones at Pumapunku and at Ollantaytambo. Here they are, those same T-shaped keystone cuts, exactly like what's in South America. Now, there's a very unusual way of fitting giant stones together. That people would independently invent this in Peru or Bolivia and also in Vietnam or something is basically impossible. I mean, it's just such an unusual way of doing it. And also, this is also in My Son. These are other hourglass type keystone cuts here. And in fact, this is cut into basalt, which is extremely hard stone. When we were there and walking around, I noticed these immediately, and I hadn't expected to see them. This was about 6 years ago or something. And I pointed out to our guide who was taking us around, and I said, "Do you see these cuts here in these stones?" I said, "These are keystone cuts." And he had never noticed them before. He had no idea what they were. So I explained the whole thing to him, and he was like, "Wow, that's really cool, how interesting." He had not paid any attention to this, nor do archaeologists in general. I mean, this is proof that that these builders were worldwide going around. Here's another one of the keystone cuts in basalt. If you look at the bottom part of down in here, yeah, I mean they've done some very fine cutting and articulation there, so that other blocks are going to lock in there. I mean, this is very unusual precision type of cutting, and again, this can only be done, in my mind, with power tools. Here's what Mison looks like today. It's not got a bunch of giant walls, but it's megalithic, and it's a fascinating place, let me tell you. And there's other sites like this around Vietnam. Their main place, and the people who are doing this were called the Cam people, C-H-A-M, Cam, or it could be K-A-M too. The Cam were these mysterious people who and their capital was actually this island here called Kulau Cam. It's a little island off of Da Nang. That was their main base. And there were these seafaring guys. And it's from them that we get words like Cambodia, Kampuchea, Cam. The ancient word in Egyptian for Egypt was Kemet. That's what the Egyptians called they didn't call themselves Egyptians, or Egypt. They called it Kemet, Cam. So here's the same word. And in fact, there seems to be a very strong connection between ancient Egypt and these Cam people. So if you go to the museum of the Cam in Da Nang, the Cam were Hindus and Buddhists, apparently. Here's like a kind of Shiva guy. Notice the big earlobes on him. Buddha is always depicted as having these very long earlobes and things like that. Here's another Cam statue. Big earlobes on him. He's also got the kind of kinky hair and a broad nose and lips. Many of the Cam look very African, actually, like as they're like Negroes, basically. Here's another unusual Cam statue. This would be of Shiva, one of the Hindu Trinity, big earlobes. Notice the third eye on his forehead there. So these are these Cam guys. He's also wearing his head like the sadhus do in India. The sadhus wear their hair in a really long, they grow their hair very long. Yeah, well, like dreadlocks, but then they tie it up in a bun, on top of their head and knot their hair, their long hair up here. And that's also kind of what you have at Easter Island. They all have these top knot things. So when you see that kind of thing, so the Cam are wearing their hair like this too. This is another Cam statue from Vietnam, which looks very Mayan. In fact, if you were to take this photo to southern Mexico or Guatemala and to show it to somebody, they would probably tell you, "Oh yeah, that's a Mayan statue. Where is it? Oh, it's in Vietnam." So here's another Cam guy. He's got his hat. He looks like the Kontiki guy. He's got a beard and a mustache. He's got his meditation beads there he's working with. Here's another Cam statue of probably Parvati, the consort of Shiva. Big long earlobes and stuff there too. And you go to Cambodia and Angkor Wat. This is Angkor Wat again, and this would be Buddha with the big earlobes carved. And they've got the metal clamps there too. And when I was there in 1999, the Japanese archaeologists were doing excavations there at Angkor Wat, and they were very, very excited to find these clamps. And they had these posters up all around Angkor Wat at the time, and so I took a photo of it. It was a big deal for them. You've got also these kind of similar monolithic doorways and stuff there at Angkor Wat. Here's, this is actually a megalith being moved on the island of Nias, which is just off the coast of Sumatra. There's a rare photo from like 1920 or something of these villagers really manhandling a giant, megalithic slab here. It's something. They're probably just moving this megalith thing from one side of the village, to the other side or something. But it's unusual. There's an island also in Indonesia called Sulawesi, and it has all of these very strange granite statues. It's a place called Bada Valley. And this is a thing from it. We'll look at that. This is Sulawesi. You can see where Bada Valley is in the middle of it. In fact, it was only about 10 years ago that they finally built a road to this place, and you need a four-wheel drive Jeep to go over this road. It's a muddy mess, let me tell you. It's hard to get to this place, very remote. Once you get into the valley, it's a kind of a Shangri-La type place. Beautiful fields and rivers. There's gold in this area. And they think that this is perhaps where rice originated. The very earliest types of rice. But what you find as you walk around Bada Valley and these very peaceful little rice farms and stuff is these statues and also these stone jars. Most of the statues are 6 or 7 feet high. They have this kind of Easter Island tiki type face like this. There's about 10 or so of them. This is the biggest one of them that's there. Here's our guides that are with us. He's leaning over. And we'll look at his face. It's pretty interesting. It's just his eyes and the way his eyebrows are sweeping there and the arc. Very smooth, very finely done. I mean, this, again, would have been done with power tools. They don't know who built this. The people there, they think that this stuff is at least 6,000 years old. They don't know how old it is. Archaeologists are baffled by it. The people don't know who made this. And what's also there are these giant stone jars, also made out of granite. And these baffle archaeologists too. They don't know why people would have done this. They've taken, and again, you would need power tools to do this. You've got these giant stone jars, and then they're hollowed out with thin rims and things like that, and they're huge. I mean, they're essentially giant kind of barrels or something. And they're just sitting out in farmers' fields and things like that. Some are broken, and you can see how thin that the walls were and how well made they are. And the farmers just leave them in their fields. They're not going to do anything with them. But again, it's a mystery of what all this is. Now, there's another place in Laos called the Plain of Jars. It's in north-central Laos. And it's got all of these stone jars, too. And there's like hundreds of them there. And they're also just well cut out. They're thousands of years old. And they don't know what they were for. The stone jar, the Plain of Jars in Laos. So here again, it's kind of the same thing in these places. And it baffles archaeologists. Big lichen patches and stuff there. And at this place in Laos, there's no real walls or other things like that. There's another site that's a campsite. It's called Priya Vihear. And it's on a mountaintop in the very northern part of Cambodia, right on the border with Thailand. And tourists couldn't go to this site until just a few years ago because the Thai army and the Cambodian army were sort of fighting over this site and as the border. Finally, the United Nations stepped in and said, this is Cambodia, not Thailand. But the Thai army is still there. So tourists can now visit this site, although you have to go through a military checkpoint. It's on top of a mountain, like Machu Picchu. And here's also the wall. Remember we saw the wall of 3 windows at Machu Picchu? It's the same thing. It's almost identical here at Priya Vihear. It's thousands of years old, big lichen patches, huge doorways, perfectly fitted blocks of stone. It's an amazing place. If you are in, say, Cambodia and Angkor Wat, do try and go to Priya Vihear if you can. It's on top of a mountain. And what's there, again, are the same key stone cuts. You can see them on this block here. If you look, I'll give you a close-up. There you are. The exact same kind of T-shaped cuts of these megaliths that we see at Pumapunku in the Andes, also at My Son in Vietnam. So here, this unusual way. Whoever is the same people and architects are building all of these huge. Here's another one. You see the these T-shaped cuts and the clamps. So the same thing is going on here in Cambodia as is going on in Peru and Bolivia. All right, let's go back to Bolivia and back to Puma Punku and what it looked like in the H blocks. We'll look at this. Here we are, monolithic doorway. This is an architect's idea. It's like, okay, what did this building really look like? Well, this was one idea of how it looked like. Here again are some of these blocks, the giant blocks, and the articulation, just how fancy it is, cutting and moving these blocks and fitting stuff, the articulation. Here are the H blocks. And so they're like some kind of Lego block that's preformed, prefabricated, and then they will fit together. And we'll do a little video real quick. You can see they're very uniform. They're all very, very similar. And then, all right, let's see if this will play. Okay, I might need you guys' help. So we're going to play this video. I think I need to make this thing smaller. Uh-oh. Okay, I need the tech guy here for a minute. All right, here we go. All right. Maybe I got it. Let's see if this will play. Is something happening? No, that's it. Okay, now it's opening. And we need to make this full screen right here. That thing. All right. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Okay, good. No, it doesn't have any sound. So in fact, I got this from Eric von Daniken. Okay. What's that? Yeah, right. How does the mainstream account for this? Right. How all this is going to fit together? What? We'll discuss that too in a little bit more. Yeah, the mainstream, all they can really do is just ignore these things. Not talk about it. We'll get to that in a minute too. I tell you what, I want to use the restroom briefly, so let me just play this for you one more time. And just take a quick. Go ahead and play that again if you want. I need to bring this back to full screen again. Let's see. Where's that? View, yeah. Oops. No, I did something wrong. there, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I'm not going to play the video anymore. Should be able to just go to the next slide now. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, is that it now? All right, okay. Okay, this is where we're at. All right, this is another architect's idea of what Pumapunku might have looked like. Yeah, so this whole thing, these pre-formed blocks are fitted together. It's almost like some giant airship or something had landed there, which has got a full-blown factory in it that for cutting and slicing rocks, of creating these H blocks, and as it spewed out the H blocks, they could just be fitted together into these, like a prefab megalithic wall or something. I mean, here's another artist's idea of perhaps what it all looked like. I mean, they don't know. They're just trying. The only structure that I have been able to find that's still around that seems to be similar to what they made at Pumapunku is this mortuary temple at Sosa's Pyramid. And this is in Saqqara. It's just outside of Cairo and Giza area. It's in that same vicinity. But here, this building seems to be very similar to what was at Pumapunku. And this is not like a tomb or a pyramid. They're not sure what this building was for, but it's also extremely well made, as most of the Egyptian buildings are too. So here you go. Here's from this is a mural from the museum at Tiwanaku. And once again, this shows you how screwy, mainstream archaeologists are. You've got these perfectly cut and formed, H blocks and stuff. And here are these Indians with their simple tunics and a campfire, melting some metals and then pouring it into the blocks. This is so typical of what they do, where you have this is what you see there that's so glaring, is, these amazingly high-tech buildings, but then, the Stone Age people who are doing it, And so you got the primitive people making the amazing high-tech stuff. And it's how the archaeologists work, they have a strange idea of like what's really going on. Just outside, and now you'll start to see how screwy it really is. Right outside of Tiwanaku, our guide showed us this one time. We were standing there, and you can see this in the distance. It's to the west of Tiwanaku. And he said, oh yeah, that's this pyramid over there, man-made pyramid, but the Bolivian government hasn't recognized it yet, and the villagers in the village are looting the pyramid right now. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Let's go, can we drive up there? And I wanted to see it. So we turned off the main road, and we're driving down this dirt road towards this pyramid, and there's a little village there. But just as we kind of got to the edge of the village, he said, oh, we can't really stay here. He said the villagers don't like it. They don't want tourists coming here, and they don't want the government coming there either. And he said, oh, we got to turn around and we got to go because, the villagers, well, they're looting this pyramid, and they don't want people to see that. Well, one of the things that came out of this pyramid, apparently, and all of this area around Tiwanaku, is this. It's called the Pocatia monolith. And it's about 4 feet high. It's broken in 2 places. And it's made out of granite. He's got a turban on his head. And on his thigh is Sumerian writing. On his thigh, Sumerian writing. And it was found at Tiwanaku. And in fact, you cannot see this. I've seen it and looked at it because Ancient Aliens, we went to the Gold Museum in La Paz, and they brought it out of a vault for us to look at and film. So but you cannot go and see this in a museum. They don't display it. Here's the Sumerian writing that's on the thigh of this statue. Sumerians wrote in hieroglyphs, and they also wrote in cuneiform. So they had two different scripts. And this is the hieroglyphs on there. These are the Sumerian signs are on there. There's been some kind of translation, I think. It's in my book. But more importantly is this thing. And this is on display, and you can see this at the Gold Museum in La Paz. It's the National Museum and a government museum there. And this is called the Fuente Magna bowl. It's a ceramic bowl, and it has two types of Sumerian writing on it. It has Sumerian hieroglyphs, and it also has cuneiform. So it's got cuneiform writing on it and Sumerian hieroglyphs. And it was also found in 1960 by this guy, Maximiliano. So Maximiliano lived near Tiwanaku, probably in that village by that pyramid, and he had dug this up on his property, and he was using it to feed his pigs. And a Catholic priest dropped by his house one day, and saw this bowl, and he was feeding the pigs in it, and he looked at it and stuff, and he thought, this is an important artifact. This is very old. This should be in a museum, kind of thing. And they traded him a house for it. Just some small kind of, not some luxury mansion or anything, but yeah, he got a house for this bowl. This was 1960. They then put it into the museum there in La Paz, but they didn't put it on display. It only went on display until just recently. They put it on display there. And so here we go. So they put it on display now, and it's only been there for maybe 10 years at the most in this museum. But this bowl is a big problem for mainstream archaeologists. This thing is a time bomb. It's a grenade. This thing totally turns mainstream archaeology on its head. This can't be there. I mean, an object with Sumerian writing, and by the way, this is the Anunnaki type stuff of the Sumerians. The Anunnaki, I mean, that's what the writing is. It's Sumerian writing and whatnot. But yeah, this can't be there. And for the mainstream, all they can do is ignore this. Yes, sir.
Has it been carbon dated? Do we know how old it is?
No, I don't. And carbon dating wouldn't do it, but there is a dating technique for ceramics called thermoluminescence. So ceramics can be dated, yeah. And they should do that. This bowl is for sure thousands of years old. It's probably like 4,000 or more, really. Yes, sir. Yeah. And in my book, I have a translation of it. It's not saying anything real important. It's a kind of libation, prayers to the gods. It was used as almost a little bit like in what? Catholic, do they do that in Catholic where they have this holy water or something like that in a bowl or whatever? That kind of a thing. And there's like prayers to Sumerian gods like that. That's what it's saying. But yeah, Sumerian scholars have looked at the writing and translated it. And if you go online, it's in my book too on this.
So does this indicate the Sumerians were the original people in South America?
Well, or that they're the ones, they're the ones who apparently Tiwanaku and Pumpuku stuff was built by Sumerians. Yeah, I mean that's what's going on, and that would be like Anunnaki and stuff. They're its original builders, or at least they were there at one point. Tin, they were mining tin. There's a lot of stuff about this. I can get into the book. There's a lot of tin in this area, and even some of the words, the Aymara words, with Tiwanaku. The tin is part of it, and there's a lot of Sumerian words that are there. But once again, so this is this is the kind of thing that, you know, mainstream archaeologists, they hate this. This throws everything out the window. All of everything they've said about the history of South America is just now wrong. And, you know, transoceanic contact, all that. All they can do is ignore this. And now here's an interesting thing, too. This was found in Bolivia. I'm convinced that if this had been found in Peru, that it would not be in the museum. I mean, some archaeologists, possibly from the United States, would go to them and say, take this out of display. Don't, you know, this should not be in your museum for people to look at. Bolivia is one of these rogue nations, and which is probably a good thing here. Bolivia is like that, and Bolivia is just, we're going to do things our way, don't tell us what to do, kind of thing, and that's a good thing here. And the Bolivians are like, yeah, well, no, this is our bowl. We found it at Tiwanaku. We're going to put it in our museum. But yeah, the mainstream archaeologists, all they can do now, because it's in that museum, it's the National Museum of Bolivia, all they can do is ignore this and pretend it's not there. Never talk about it. Never mention it. Don't do a National Geographic special about this. They can't do that. Don't put it on TV. Don't mention it. And it is going to get mentioned, but only in a show like Ancient Aliens. I mean, they've done that in the show. So fortunately, yeah, shows like Ancient Aliens are going to talk about this, but the mainstream cannot. They've got to ignore it. They have to. Because it tears apart everything they've done. That one single bowl in that museum. So here we go. This is what the Sumerian hieroglyphs and stuff look like, and Hittite was kind of a similar. All right, let's go back to the museum, which is actually at Tiwanaku. We're still in Bolivia. Here's what an Aymara Indian looks like, the people who really live around Lake Titicaca today. This looks exactly like them. They don't have facial hair, they don't shave, they don't have mustaches. He's wearing a turban. And now here, these are some other ceramics and stuff that are at the Tiwanaku Museum. The guy on top has the big, thick mustache and beard. The guy below looks very Chinese, actually, very, very Oriental. So there at Tiwanaku, you would be like it seemed like there were many races there. There were, bearded guys and Chinese guys and then American Indians. This is also on display there at the museum at Tiwanaku. They've removed this from display. So now we'll get into some of these strange, weird, elongated heads and stuff. So if you look at this carefully, you will see some elongated heads. You weren't supposed to take a photo of this, they said, but I took one anyway. Yeah. But this is not on display anymore. They've removed this, so you can't see it. But here we go. Some of these elongated heads, we'll see some better ones coming up. All right, so now we're going to go now to Peru and to the coast of Peru, to the Paracas, Ica area. Lima, the capital of Peru, is farther up north on this map. So we're going into this area, Ica and Paracas. It's a very dry desert area. There's a lot of skeletal material, a lot of skulls and mummies and things like that. It's very, very dry desert, so things are very well preserved there. And it's here where you really see some of the most unusual and incredible of the skulls. These strange cone heads with their elongated skulls. I mean, some of their skulls are double the size of our own. And they have these long cone heads. Some of it still has hair. I mean, these are some pretty weird looking guys. And this is totally, totally real. Here's another one coming from the Chongos, his elongated head. These guys are thousands of years old. They're probably from, in my mind, about 500 BC or something like that. This is the Chongos Pyramid near Paracas, where some of these skulls are coming out of excavations that they're doing around here. This big cemetery and necropolis kind of area. So once again, seeing some of these skulls. We know that we know that there's a way of taking infants and manipulating their skull and with a kind of a head binding. We'll see that. We know that that has been done and that people can do that. But the big question is, why are they doing that, for starters, creating these elongated skulls? And are they trying to imitate other people who naturally have these elongated skulls, some kind of aristocrats or royalty or something? So, and whether some people, whether they have this naturally. And this is a skull, also from Paracas, that's very unusual. This could be some kind of alien skull. When you're doing the head binding and stuff, you have these plates in your head, and they will then fuse. As you get older, they fuse up on at the top of your head and create these little stitches and stuff like that. This skull does not have the normal fusing of the plates on the head like a normal human would have it. Look at it again. This is an extremely unusual skull. I mean, and this could be some kind of different than a human, than humans as we know, and with a naturally elongated skull like this. I mean, we just don't know. But so the idea that some children and some race of people, or half human, half extraterrestrial, or something like that, had these elongated heads and were tall like this. Some of the heads and skulls there, this is in the Gold Museum in Lima, in Peru. He's been trepanned, which is cutting a hole in your head. That's called trepanning. And then he's had a gold plate put in his head, and he lived much longer than that. His bone grew around the plate. So he had some kind of brain surgery or something. And many of the skulls too have red hair. So you have these red-headed people that are there. In the same area, which is Paracas, is this thing called the Candlestick of the Andes, which is going out, which you can see from it from the ocean. Like if you're a ship coming along, you would see this, and it's kind of pointing towards Nazca and sort of pointing towards Tiwanaku. So just south of this area is Nazca, and the famous Nazca Plain. They have all these lines and figures, hummingbirds, weird trapezoids. Some of the mountains these little hills have been leveled off. It's all very strange, and it can really only be seen from the air. And it seems like there's a number of different things going on there, but this is a whole mystery. The actual making of the lines themselves wouldn't be so difficult. They just had to scrape off the kind of topsoil, really, to expose a lighter soil underneath. But why would they be doing this? And archaeologists have been baffled by this. Still today, there's various different theories. None of them really can explain it all. But it all has to be seen from the air, and that's for sure. So, yeah, they're trying to attract people, from in the sky and stuff. All right, so also these long-headed skulls and stuff like that they're in Mexico. This is an Olmec skull coming from like Comacalco and Villahermosa and La Venta area. So the Olmecs themselves were very mysterious. They are pre-Mayan. These guys are Olmecs, and they have these cone heads, strange eyes and stuff. You have also in that area, this one is in Yucatan, he's a pumpkin head. So his head has been smashed in, rather than elongated, he's had his head kind of smashed in and widened. So he's a strange looking guy, all right. You don't want to really meet any of these guys in a dark alley, I don't think. So this is the kind of head binding. This is what they can do. They know that this kind of thing went on. The binding of the head, the forcing of these cranial into a deformation. Now the Olmecs themselves were not really known until 1940. In 1940, archaeologists were brought from all over the world to Mexico City to a big conference where they announced this new civilization, the Olmecs, the rubber people. They're pre-Mayan. And many of the things that we ascribe to the Mayans were invented by the Olmecs. And the Olmecs often look like they're these African-looking guys, big, wide noses and lips. They're often wearing these helmets. Other Olmecs also look different. They're bearded, kind of Phoenician-looking guys, huge boulders, giant heads. And some of the Olmec stuff is in Guatemala. Olmec things have been found all the way to Costa Rica, and they're on the Pacific. The Olmecs are on both the Pacific and Atlantic sides of Mexico, essentially. And many of these heads were buried. Some were defaced. They're very, very finely made. They're made out of basalt. They weigh about 20 tons. They're called the colossal heads. They have there's about 20 of them that are known. Very, very well made on a very hard stone. It would seem to be power tools, again, are being used to make this. They would just find these giant heads in the jungles. This is the oil area of Mexico, too, so that they would use bulldozers. The oil companies would go in with bulldozers and stuff, and then they would dig up these giant heads buried like in the jungle. And at Levanta and other places, that they were very well-planned cities with plumbing and aquatic systems and sewers and stuff like that. Very, very sophisticated. So the whole Olmec area is this Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the narrowest part of Mexico. And in fact, at one point they were going to do, before they built the Panama Canal, they had two other sites to try to have a canal between the Atlantic and the Pacific. The other site was in Nicaragua, and the other one was here at the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. It's a very narrow part. And what the Mexican government did instead was just build a railway across this part to link the Pacific. But so the Olmecs were on the Pacific coast and the Atlantic coast. This is one of the Olmec statues too that's in Jalapa, Mexico, near Veracruz. He looks very Egyptian, and in fact, he's got a false beard. As the Egyptians would wear that too, these false beards. He's got a kind of pharaoh kind of headdress, very unusual looking statue. He's an Olmec. The Olmecs were the rubber people. They're the ones that literally created the rubber balls and the ball games that the Mayans were famous for. These rubber ball courts are as far north as Utah. And the rubber balls, they had to play with rubber balls, which had to come from the jungles of southern Mexico and things like that. This is a very strange head here, and it's Olmec. And it's these pock marks on him. Let's see. So they couldn't figure this out, archaeologists. Is that somebody with like a power tool, some grinder, just went up to this head and started defacing it. I mean, he's dishing out all these little pock marks on his head. And archaeologists can't figure this out. But why anyone would do this? And even how. So after this statue was finished, it's like they didn't like this guy or something. And literally, and they're just playing with their power tools, dishing out quickly his head. And they're defacing the statue.
Rich teenagers.
Yes, getting a hold of dad's craftsman tools or something, yeah. That's a strange thing. Same thing with this. This is a monolith that's in the Olmec Park in Villahermosa. And on the back of it, it's just got all these like drill holes. Here we go. Yeah, so here, it's the same thing. It's like some guy with a power drill is just playing with it, drilling holes in the back of this, granite statue.
For no reason. You know what? I think the battery's gone dead on this.
Or I just hitting it, I'm not sure. Okay, this is also at Comacalco. This is a great thing. This has been taken off display too. These are all a bunch of Olmec guys. In fact, there's some. So yeah, you got all these weird looking guys, and like this, these guys here. So some look very Chinese. Other all this famous Olmec frown. Just some weird looking dudes here. They've taken this off display. Last time I was at Calico, they had to move this. It's just too weird. So just like I was saying before, you know, the archaeologists will go in to these places. In my mind, American archaeologists, and they go in and they look at some of these oddball displays in Mexico or Peru or Bolivia, and they say, take this off display. This is too strange. I mean, you look at this stuff and you're just like, man, these are Olmecs? They're a bunch of weird dudes, you know. So anyway, I mean, I find that interesting because I'm able to return to all these different places, and I get photos of them, and I was like, well, why have they taken that off display? It's not there anymore. All right, this is also an Olmec thing of these Celts, and these are jade. They're, again, if you look at them, they have all these cone heads and stuff like that. And so now we're still talking about cone heads. Here's this. Let's go to Egypt briefly. This is Megatotun, one of the daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. And this is how she looked. She also had this elongated head. I mean, this is a statue of her from the Cairo Museum. So yeah, she's also got this elongated head. Akhenaten and Nefertiti had heads like that. Nefertiti was not an Egyptian, by the way. She was a Hittite from Turkey and whatnot. This is Tutankhamun. This is a statue from his own tomb. He was a cone head too. This is what Tutankhamun looked like. This is his own statue of himself from his tomb. He's a cone head. And you hear all this stuff about, you know, Tutankhamun this and that. You never hear that, yeah, he had this elongated head like that. They never talk about that. Yeah, I mean, it's all very strange. Now the Anunnaki. These are the Ubaid figures. These are from Samaria, northern Iraq today area. Here we go. They found these statues. They have the coffee bean eyes. These are supposedly the Anunnaki. They were cone heads with their elongated heads. They have these weird eyes that archaeologists call these coffee bean eyes. They're real. So, I mean, the statues are real. So, yeah, this is what they look like in Samaria, in northern Iraq. These guys. I mean, what can we say? In China, this guy is some Taoist, you know, master from China. And he's a cone head, big way. And in fact, also the Chinese Taoists, you got the pumpkin head kind of guys with their weird split faces and stuff. So, I mean, and what's so strange about this is that this is real. I mean, we have skeletons. We've got the skulls of these guys. I mean, we're not making this stuff up. It's that weird. And they were in Korea and stuff like that too. A lot of it, they're not, except in desert areas, these things aren't well preserved. The Chinooks of the Seattle area, they were cone heads too. And in fact, I went to high school in Missoula, Montana, and just north of Missoula is Flathead Lake, the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. And it's called Flathead Lake because the Flathead Indians lived around there. And they were called the Flathead Indians because they were cone heads and had these flat heads and all stuff. And you know, and that's more of a, you know, they were manipulating the skull, but why were they doing that? Did somebody have a question? No, okay. This was a skull just found recently, 1999 in northern Mexico. This skull, he's a strange looking cone head guy. And this French skull from 2000 BC, he's a cone head. Hungarians too were doing that. People were still doing this head binding up through the 1960s, believe it or not. In Vanuatu, also the Kurds there. This is from Africa. So this little kid this photo taken in about 1922. Yeah, this little kid. So here we go. By binding the head of a baby and doing all this, you can start manipulating it and turning him into some kind of a cone head. The whole question is on all this, why are they doing that? You know, what is the purpose? I mean, we know that, again, well, I was talking about it. So they're trying to imitate these other people who have these cone heads, and they're these aristocrats of the Anunnaki, and they're wanting to look like them. Vanuatu, in an island there in the Pacific, they were doing this up to the 1960s, and many of those people are cone heads. This was interesting too, just to go the other way. This is the Pedro Mountain mummy, was found in Wyoming in the 1930s by a prospector. He blasted out a cliff, and there was a cave there, and this tiny being, mummified being, was there. They call him it's from the Pedro Mountains of Wyoming, and he was even X-rayed. This guy, I mean, he's this little person, and who was mummified. They took him to Chicago. They mummified him. In 1950, I mean, they X-rayed him in Chicago. But he disappeared in 1950. Something, you know, like somebody sold him. It's vanished. We don't know where it is. So this is, again, one of those things that the normal mainstream powers that be, they did not want this thing out there. This guy. I mean, he was on display. What I've been told, too, is that the posture that he's in, the way his arms and legs are crossed, is some special yoga position. That's what people have told me. There's a reward out now for this thing. If anybody knows where it is, it's in your grandmother's basement or something, you know. Dig it out. But another kind of oddball thing that's just kind of missing. All right, let's see. We're supposed to go to till 7:45 or 7:30? 7:45. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, let's go to Colombia now. And we're going to go to a place called San Agustin, which is in sort of western Colombia, near to the Ecuador border. San Agustin is a weird place, also kind of like the Olmecs, where they started digging up all these strange, giant statues. And they're bizarre. Weird guys, sort of gargoyles, big eyes. There's dolmens. Strange statues. Some of them look Egyptian. There you have all these strange beards, different kinds of people. It's a very, very interesting area. A lot of the people are kind of monsters, gargoyle things. They've found, you know, scores of these bizarre statues. They're often wearing strange hats. They have big collars and medals. This is a gold area. There's a lot of gold and mining in this part. Birds and things like that. There's rivers that run through the San Agustin. It's way up in these mountains. Strange carved buildings like this, carved out of solid rock. It's megalithic stuff for sure. Big sarcophagi and tombs or something, perhaps too. This was for mining or some kind of crucible in mining. It's a gold area. I think what they were doing there was extracting gold. This is what it looks like around San Agustin. Lots of rivers and stuff coming down. Here you see what it looks like today. They've got these statues that they've dug up and they've put little covers on them. This is very similar to what that statue in Bada Valley with the eyes. And this statue is very interesting too in the sense that very perfect, and the eyes and the nose and the kind of sweeping things, the way he has his hands. Once again, power tools having to do this. You couldn't really make something like that without power tools. Some of them are standing there. They're in these dolmens and things like that. They've sort of put them up in these parks. Some of them have strange sort of backpack jetpack things on them. They're wearing really odd clothing. Like this guy, what he's got something weird on his back. We don't know what it is. They're often in these strange. Here's a woman. She's wearing this oddball hat and skirts. They're often dressed very strangely. This was a ceramic thing there. I thought this was pretty cool. And I call him, the Rocket Man or something. I mean, he looks like kind of a cool guy. And so this is what they look like, I guess. These guys at San Augustine. He seems to be also be wearing some turban and stuff, the big ears. He doesn't seem like such a scary guy. What's that? Is it a he? Yeah, right. Maybe it's a woman, actually. I was thinking it was a man, but perhaps it's a woman. I don't know. I just thought he was very elegantly dressed and got the eyes. He's got a cool expression. So when you're in Bogota is the Gold Museum. That's the capital of Colombia. And if you go to the Gold Museum there, you're going to see all this amazing stuff. And all these gold artifacts that largely come from San Augustine. Guys like this. I mean, this is pretty oddball kind of thing. This is solid gold. By the way, all gold in the world still exists today. Gold is indestructible. Other metals are going to rust and oxidize. They'll decay, but not gold. All gold from ancient times still exists today. You cannot destroy gold. All, that gets recycled into jewelry or whatever. So the Gold Museum in Colombia is just full of all these gold artifacts and some other stuff too. But, some of them are just pretty weird. Here's the guy, I call him the fireman. He's got some nozzle or something that he's doing. Perhaps he's really a miner with some, water jet and stuff like that, and he's washing out the ores or something. We don't know what's going on with him. Sun discs. That's the sun disc at the Coricancha, the Sun Temple in Cusco. There were supposedly these large gold discs of the sun. Even what seemed to be kind of like part of tools, they're calling this a rotation disc. Looks like some kind of a saw or something, although it's some gold alloy. It probably wouldn't have really worked well as a saw. Also on display there were all these, they're crystal and amber beads and things. And they're pretty interesting because like these quartz crystal beads, and they're drilled all the way through of quartz crystal. That again, that would have to be done with a power tool to be drilling through quartz crystal and creating that. So just in museums all around the world, you can often see some pretty amazing artifacts, and anything made out of quartz crystal is special because cutting quartz and working it, making a crystal skull, as another example. That has to be done with power tools. Here's another guy. So these guys, and this is at the museum there. So he's a conehead too. So these guys at San Augustine, they're also these coneheads with these elongated skulls and all that kind of stuff. This was a ceramic pottery there, very well done. It looking kind of oriental, but very stylized. These guys were amazing artists and stuff. And it's at this museum where you have the famous gold airplanes. So you go there, they have them on display. They've got them there. They're quite small. They're just a couple of inches long or something, and they have wings and whatnot. The mainstream explanation for this is that, they can't be airplanes or anything, so there have to be models of flying fish or bees or something. That's what they're saying. Because see, birds don't have, the kind of fins and stuff like that on the airplanes, like that. So, and in fact, this is what, Giorgio and of Legendary Times, he's got his gold airplane pin that you can buy from him if you want. And I've got a couple, of course. So anyway, here's a flying fish. They actually make some gold flying fish stuff if they want. So, but yeah, I guess a gold airplane is really a gold airplane. So the whole idea of flight, ancient flight, I've always been fascinated in that. Vimana I've written several books on Vimanas. In Sanskrit, the Vimana is a Sanskrit word for an airship, some kind of airplane. And this is actually from the Bangkok airport. This is Rama of the Ramayana flying through the air in his flying chariot drawn by flying horses. And that's part of the thing, is that in the Ramayana, which is a story of, the Ramayana is a story of, yeah, I'll go on to that in a second. In the Ramayana, what happens is Rama is this king in northern India in a place called Ayodhya, and he gets married, and you know everything's going great, but then suddenly his wife is kidnapped, or perhaps she's run off with this other guy named Ravana. He takes her in his Vimana to Lanka, the island, this mysterious place called Lanka, which today they think is Sri Lanka, and Rama's bummed out for a while, you know, his wife's gone and stuff, and then he kind of says, hey, you know, I'm going to get that woman back, and he goes to Hanuman and he gets his brother, but they fly in their Vimanas, and Vimanas are a big part of the story. They have a war, and they're fighting, and they fly around, and finally he rescues her. They fly back in their Vimana. So every Hindu and every Buddhist knows this story well, and they all believe it. And so for the literally 1 billion Hindus and Buddhists around the world, yeah, Vimanas are a normal thing. I mean, they're like, yeah, well, sure, they had airships and stuff in the past.
Was Adam's Bridge part of that story?
Yeah, or Rama's Bridge, as they call it. Yeah, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Yeah, that they built that bridge. That is part of the story. So the whole idea of flight, you know, in Vimanas and stuff, you need metals and you need electricity, really, for flight. And they had electricity in ancient times. We know that. They had batteries and things like that. Here's the famous Baghdad battery and whatnot. This is the Antikythera device, which was found in 1900 in a shipwreck off the island, the Greek island of Antikythera. It has a date and everything. This was a cogged wheels. It was very complicated computer, fancier than any Swiss clock. It's got a date on it. It's like from 200 BC, and they think it was an astronomical calculator. But I mean, very, very complicated machinery. And in fact, I mean, these are some ideas of what it looked like. Today, it's in the Athens Museum, the Antikythera device. But when in the 1950s, it was really studied by American archaeologists and Scientific American, and that's when they figured out that it was this complicated device. And they said, they made the statement, they said, boy, we never imagined that the ancient Greeks had anything remotely like this. It's so advanced and technical. And they said, this is like finding a jet airplane in the tomb of King Tut, you know, which is practically, you know, maybe they almost found a jet airplane in some ancient tomb. That's what, like Edgar Cayce would call the Hall of Records. So yeah, here's this famous Egyptian thing. This is at the Dendera Temple, which is also near to Abydos. There's several of these there at the temple. This is completely real. And it's interesting here to look at it. Once again, the mainstream the mainstream Egyptologists have to explain this. So, yeah, you're looking at this, and it seems you've got what seems to be some kind of bulb, and the filament, it's a snake. We were looking at those snakes. It's got a cable coming out of it. Some little guys here. These are jed columns, a little strange with the arms and the cables, and they're going to this box. It would be some kind of perhaps a light, a big projection bulb, some kind of electrical device. I mean, we're not real sure what it is. This sacred baboon and stuff here, and all these little mini guys. I mean, this is all very strange. I don't know what these hieroglyphs say up here. I'd be interested to get that. So the mainstream archaeologists have to explain this. Have to explain it. Yeah. Okay. So here's the mainstream Egyptological explanation for this. It's actually It's actually very simple. These are lotus flowers right here, and this is the aroma of the flower. There you go. Because it can't be an electrical device, can it? It can't be something electrical. So it has to be something else. So it's just a flower. That's all. Nothing to see here. Move on. Move along. What's that? Yeah. But yeah, I don't know what those. People often ask me. I don't know what those inscriptions say. I try to find out. Get some. I don't read. I don't read hieroglyphs, honestly. And that is actually another point that I'd like to make. I know I'm starting to. We're almost to the end here. But look, this is the other thing with, say, Egyptologists is such a good example. That with Egyptologists are not architects and they're not engineers. So to an Egyptologist, you have these giant buildings, you have the Great Pyramid and stuff like that. To Egyptologists, they're just saying like, well, yeah, the Pharaoh just ordered them to make all this stuff. And so, the slaves dragged the stones up and they just built all these things, Yeah, the Pharaoh wanted. They just, whatever, thousands of guys dragging on the things, whatever. But the thing is but they're not experts. Egyptologists aren't experts in architecture and engineering. They don't go out building giant shopping malls or things like that. What they know is Egyptian hieroglyphics. They know the king lists of Egypt. They know all that kind of, that's what they know. They don't know engineering and architecture. So they're not experts in that. And it's when you bring an expert in engineering and architecture and you show him these things in Egypt or in Peru or whatever, and you ask him, he's the expert. He's the one going, man, I don't know how they did this. I have no explanation for this. Okay? He's the expert. The architect, the engineer, not the archaeologist. So that's the problem here, is that, if you're an archaeologist and you're talking about megalithic building and stuff, you're out of your field. That's not what you studied. All right, so anyway, I do want to show you this, which you can see up here. I hope you can see it, which is insects, but it's right over in here. And it's this is this is on a lintel at Abydos. And this thing looks like kind of a helicopter. And then here's this jet plane thing here. This also looks like some kind of plane. It's not. This is real too. And so here we go. This thing here. I've been told I've asked Egyptologists about this. They say their explanation for this is that it's two hieroglyphs superimposed on the other. Like they had a hieroglyph and then they chiseled another one on top of it. And that is a kind of a good explanation for some of it. But I've been told that this one here, that looks kind of like a jet plane, that is no known hieroglyph. This one here, that's no known hieroglyph or combination of hieroglyphs. They can't explain that. And they don't know what that is. And it looks like it's like a jet or some kind of airplane. Here's something else that's interesting too. This is a gold pendant from Panama. And we were talking about that. Gold is indestructible. Here's a color picture of it. It's on display in the Gold Museum in Panama. Well, this thing is what's called a zoomorphic object. It's a kind of, monster kind of creation, but it looks like it's heavy machinery. It looks like it's like a backhoe. Here's the front of it. It's got a skid plate on the thing. Here's again what it looks like. So it seems to be really a jewelry or model of a backhoe with these blades and stuff like that. And here, so if you had some big heavy machinery in this, bulldozers, graders, backhoes, digging machines. I live in Illinois, and one of the great things in businesses in Illinois is Caterpillar and John Deere too. But yeah, the building and creating of big, heavy machinery for digging out ditches and moving big mounds and stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's apparently what they had. So here we are. Here we can morph this zoomorphic thing into a backhoe. So one of my big famous heroes, Ivan T. Sanderson, he was the one who found this. They found this also in a tomb in Saqqara, Pharaoh's tomb. It seems to be a model of an airplane. This is from the Dasani Monastery now in Slovakia. And yeah, this guy seems to be flying through the air in his sort of little flying craft of some sort. And the ancient Chinese had all these also stories of emperors and different people, and they had their flying machines that would go flying around. Very, very common in the legends and mythology and stuff like that. It's a story, too, of King Solomon having a flying machine, and also his son that he had with Queen of Sheba. There you can see the radio right there. Yeah. No, this was like a cartoon. The Kebra Nagast is the Ethiopian book, and what happened with this cartoon was it was a review of it in a British newspaper, back in the 40s. So they drew this cartoon because it talks about them flying in these flying machines, and they fly from Jerusalem and Gaza. They fly to Aksum in Ethiopia, and that's the Queen of Sheba. So it's just kind of a funny thing, but that's what the book describes, by the way. I mean, it's talking about them flying. They call it the Wagon of Zion in the Kebra Nagast, this flying machine that King Solomon and stuff has. So here we go. This is actually an Assyrian cylinder seal. You see here, though, it's a winged disc, and the three guys are sitting up there. So yeah, the winged disc. Mohenjo-daro in the Mahabharata, which in the Ramayana is part of the Mahabharata. It's talking about these devastating wars that just destroyed whole cities and leveled them and stuff like that. Well, at Mohenjo-daro, which is today in Pakistan, where the strange writing and seals, very well, these are ancient cities, very well pre-planned. Like this is an extinct kind of Brahma bull. This is some proto-cattle that doesn't exist anymore. But when they got in the late 1940s, after World War II, when British and Pakistani archaeologists got digging to the street level of Mohenjo-daro, they found people just lying dead in the streets. I mean, some doom had taken over this city and killed everybody. And they were just lying dead in the streets, like holding hands. It was like some atomic bomb had been dropped on this city. Well, what had happened was, thousands, this city is from at least like 3000 BC, maybe more. And this doom had come over the city, and then this is the Sindh area, and the Thar Desert is right there. So over thousands of years, just dust, and people abandoned these cities, and so they were covered in dirt and dust from thousands of years. And then it was starting in 1947, they started to really excavate these cities. And in fact, a lot of it's an interesting story with Mohenjo-daro and stuff, because these aren't megalithic cities. They're built out of very well-fired bricks. So they're actually brick cities. And the British were building this railway line before World War II, and they needed ballast for the railway tracks, and to kind of build up the railway track, the thing for the railway tracks to go on and just elevate a little bit. And so at one point, with these British engineers, the Indian guys, they said, oh yeah, we'll get all these bricks from over here, and we'll use it. And the British engineers finally said, really, where are you getting all these bricks? And they said, oh, there's a city over here, in the desert, all covered with dirt and dust, and we've been taking the bricks from there. And then, so the archaeologists said, well, we got to go check this out. So anyway, they did the excavations, and people were just dying dead in the streets. This doom had taken over these cities. People were dead. And these cities were abandoned. Just like in the Mahabharata, what the Mahabharata had said. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Great. Okay. Yeah. And some of these skeletons, it's reported, were radioactive, and there was like radioactivity there. Yeah. I mean, they point to this as possible evidence of some kind of ancient atomic war. Also, what they found at Mohenjo-daro were these melted black kind of globs of ceramics, and what they appeared to be were pottery that had been super heated, like an atomic blast, and like melted. So that was a strange thing. This is Vishnu on Garuda flying through the air. Vishnu, part of the Hindu Trinity. So the whole kind of concept of people flying around and flying or going places in their airships. I mean, it's very common motif, particularly in Asia and all that. This is here where I was talking about before with Ayodhya. So in the Ramayana, and we'll see now that Rama's bridge and stuff, Adam's bridge, whatever they call it. So Rama supposedly lived up here in Ayodhya, and then although the Mahabharata seems to almost make it, the Ramayana, that they flew west way out here. But anyway, she was supposedly taken down here to Sri Lanka. And so here, and here we go, just another kind of vision of a Vimana with here being pulled by birds. This is literally, Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, chariot being pulled through the air by giant birds. Okay, so here's the Rama's bridge going between southern India and Sri Lanka. And what this is like, it's barely underwater now. These are satellite photos of it. And it's kind of like it's this narrow causeway similar to the road out to Key West in Florida. If you've ever driven out to Key West, you leave, Key Largo or whatever, and as you start driving out to Key West, you're driving on this thin little slender, bit of land that's going all the way, and then it ends at Key West, and it goes for, it's like 60 miles or something like that. And that's what we've got here. And this is part of the story of the Ramayana, that they built this bridge to Lanka. Now, the middle part of it now is just, it's underwater, but it's only about 20 feet or 30 feet, maybe 40 feet underwater. So ships that are going between India and Sri Lanka that way have to be very careful not to run aground and stuff as they pass through this area, because there's only a few parts where ships can go through. But this appears to be some kind of man-made, special road that was built in ancient times going between India and Sri Lanka.
There's a story of a Muslim that actually walked it sometime since Muhammad.
Is that right? Okay, I've never heard that. That's interesting. Okay, and that's the Adams, the Muslim, right? And there's also a peak in Sri Lanka called Adam's Peak. Have you ever been to Sri Lanka? No, okay. You go there and you get up on Adam's Peak is interesting, and it supposedly has this giant footprint on the top of the mountain, and it's Adam's footprint to Muslims, or it's Buddha's footprint, or it's Krishna's footprint or something like that. So yeah, but Adam is, and yeah, there are Muslims still in Sri Lanka, and Hindus and Buddhists and Christians. So look, in the Mahabharata and Ramayana and stuff like that, they're talking, they talk about Vimanas and how people would use them, but just like in a modern novel where the hero suddenly goes to the airport and gets on a plane and flies to London or something, a novelist doesn't stop and tell you what an airplane is and explain it and describe it for you. He knows that you know what an airplane is. And so that's how the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and all these books are. They talk about Vimanas, but they don't go into great detail about what they are. Well, incredibly, there was this book supposedly found in the Royal Baroda Library in 1924 called the Vimanika Shastra. And it was a book all about Vimanas and how Vimanas were made, what they were like, the different kinds of Vimanas. Mercury is part of it. Other books talk about it too. So the whole Vimana, some Vimanas were discs, like fine discs, they were round. This other guy in the 1920s drew pictures of his own way that he was trying to conceptualize what was talked about in the Vimanika Shastra. One of the Vimanas was called a Rukma Vimana. It was kind of a sort of flying saucer kind of thing. You know, the guys have drawn propellers and stuff on it, but that's not really what's described there. I mean, it was, and when they were doing this, it was really our own era of flight had just begun. And there was a Tripura Vimana, which is kind of like a cigar-shaped, elongated craft. The Shakuna Vimana, which was like a winged craft, more similar to like an airplane or something like that. In some of the different cases, they talk about Mercury. So we'll just finish up here. Mercury is part of the Vimanas, supposedly. And in Western tradition, Mercury is a metal, it's an element, it's a liquid, it's a conductor. Mercury was the god of communication, the god of flight. He flew through the air. That was the whole story of Mercury. The whole caduceus is also a symbol of Mercury. Seems to be like what's called a Mercury vortex. Mercury, it's what they call also, there's a type of thing called a Mercury gyro. What happens is you put gyros you put Mercury into a gyro. Mercury has to be in a closed system. And you have a gyro. Gyros themselves are anti-gravity. But with a Mercury gyro, as you get it into a gyroscopic fluid, Mercury is unique because you can then put electricity into it. So you can electrify it. So now you have a gyroscope, but it's a gyro of an electrified gas. It's a plasma. It's what they call it, a Mercury gyro. In theory, those things are anti-gravity and they fly. And that, in theory, would be how the Mercury is part of these craft. I kind of get into that in my Vimana books. That is the end of my presentation, everybody. And I see my time's up, so thank you for coming. Thanks for coming. I guess we got to get out of here. Any last questions or something from this? Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they are. But you know, that's just an Islamic thing. I mean, ISIS and Saudi Arabia, there's not much difference between those guys, I got to tell you. Yeah, they destroy it. Well, here's the thing. In Islam, and with radical Islamists, they don't want anything that is idolatrous and from before. And what was that, Palmyra and places like that, there are statues. See, there are not to be any images of Muhammad. Oh, that would make them mad. That's why that Charlie Hebdo and those cartoonists, just to draw a cartoon of Muhammad makes them very, very mad. But they don't like any kind of statue and stuff. So in Islamic art is all kind of geometry and stuff like that. They rarely would like draw people. And that's what they don't like. They'll destroy it. Yes, ma'am. You know, there is Mystery Hill in New Hampshire. In New England, there are some dolmens and stuff. But not so much in the United States, but in Mexico, there's megalithic stuff for sure. And in Guatemala, and in Costa Rica, Nicaragua too. So North America does have megaliths. Not the United States so much. And here in the Southwest, like with Pueblos and stuff, they're not megalithic. But in New England, there are some megalithic sites, I would say. Yeah, but it's what's kind of missing in the United States. Yes? Yeah, Chaco Canyon is very nicely built, but it's not megalithic. It's not megalithic. Yes, sir. Yeah, right. I mean, they're evolving. they're evolving, and it's hard when you've written textbooks and you're teaching. You know, they have to kind of get rid of the old guys. As a new generation of archaeologists come along, you know, things will change. And again, kind of what I was saying, how what archaeologists need to do is allow other experts, engineers, architects, people who work in quarries, stonemasons. In a sense, you know, they're the experts in those cases, and archaeologists really need to listen to them. Yes, one last question. Yes, sir. Yeah, right. And, you know, look, that last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where, you know, Indiana Jones is saying, oh, well, where's the Ark now? You know, I'd like to see it since I rescued it and stuff. And they say, don't worry. Top men are working on it. Top men. And that last scene, they're putting the Ark in this giant warehouse, and nobody's ever going to see it. I mean, and that is, stuff like that does go on. That's what I have concluded. That, yeah, there are archaeological cover-ups. And it has to do with a lot of giants and stuff, too, where they find giant skeletons, or guys are 8 feet, 9 feet tall with red hair. Yeah, those things, they don't want those in the museums. I mean, they take them out. Yeah.